India's transition slowly started moving towards a different phase altogether, called as the development, the industrialization stage. Today, India has become one of the most developing nations when it comes to the car and the automobile sector. Agriculture sector had taken a backseat because of the income parity, but nevertheless it was substituted by the manufacturing and the services sector. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 1, Unit 1, first semester B.Ba, Pre-Reforms of Indian Economy, where we are going to talk about the features of Indian economy. Now moving on, Indian economy, when I say that word, it's so diverse, it's so big, it's such a magnificent economy that probably it takes ages for us to understand the diversification, the growth, the aspects of our economy. Now looking here, this is right at the middle stage of a developing market economy. It's the world's fifth largest economy. Right now we are bouncing on to the number 4 very shortly by nominal GDP, and the third largest by the purchasing power parity, which means to say that India is no less, no short of defining the world as the world's strongest economy, the world's most powerful and emerging economy altogether. Now when we look at this factor, but though we have certain ranks that put us down, there are certain factors that make us think that why is that the Indian economy is still not able to take on the reins of the global stage and produce and pronounce itself as the numero uno in terms of the economic rankings. Let's just go further, try to understand the features of Indian economy. Moving on, we have the growth phase of the Indian economy in 3 factors, starting from 1950-51 to that of 80, the first phase, the 30 years. 1980 to 1993-94, that 13 years, very crucial, we're going to talk about it. 94-95 to present, extremely important and a rapid phase of growth altogether. Now let's go one by one to understand the features here. The first stage, the 1950 to 1979-80, this is a stage when India was liberated from the hands of British. We all know the freedom struggle and the amount of pressure that India went through to declare itself as a free republic nation altogether. From the year 1950, since the Planning Commission was formed and with our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru being at the center stage, Indian economy started growing in leaps and bounds, but yes, we started making those baby steps in terms of understanding how growth can be made possible. Our initial thought process in this first 30 years was onto the sectors of agriculture, then moving forward to that of industry, and then we started talking about the education sector. So the last 30 years, that's the first 30 years when we are talking about our educational growth, our agricultural pronouncement, and that of the industrial development was really something fantastic. Why? Because we wanted to see India as a developing nation. We wanted India to be not physically free, but also intellectually, financially, morally, and economically a strong nation. So this was our time. This was the period where we planned for our future years. As the years went by, as we started moving from stage to stage. With the new prime ministers coming in after Jawaharlal Nehru, what happened is that India's transition slowly started moving towards a different phase altogether, called as the development, the industrialization stage. Now, during the 80s and the 90s, we were worried about the licensing raj that was going on for the industrial sector. India believed in giving job security and income security to the people. So what we did is that we gave a lot of importance to the central public sector altogether. So a lot of PSUs were given prominence, and we were not actually in the path of privatization. So many of the private companies did not find an opportunity to grow with the Indian economy. We were trying to concentrate on those heavy industrial segment. We were trying to give more importance to the central government organizations, by which what happened is in the year 1991, we were forced to relook into our own policy. We had completely gone down in terms of foreign exchange. We did not even have enough money to move forward. So after the year 91-92, the post-liberalization, privatization and globalization period, we started emerging as a stronger nation. Post 94-95, it's a very important time period. Why? Because that was the stage, that was the era where we started giving importance to privatization. We started seeing information technology as a sector of liberalization. We started seeing IT as a growth, as a revenue cycle. Private banks started coming up. The services sector started taking center stage. We shifted our focus from manufacturing to services, and our economy started growing rapidly. Now that stage till the present, 2022, we are experiencing a very, very phenomenal growth. We are seeing that India has been making rapid strides in possibly every single sector. Starting from the markets to that of the manufacturing sector, India has been able to create a niche for itself in every walk of life. And that's exactly why India is today enjoying predominantly a very, very important space in the Asian economy as well as in the world economy. Today, India is ready to experiment, is ready to take the bull by its horn and start working towards a global manufacturing hub and also the most innovative service model that any country can think about. Our policies are liberated, our policies are more action-oriented, they're more direct in terms of getting onto the business, and we have also started focusing towards the ease of doing business in this economy. So overall, what we see is that the economy has been able to make itself more vibrant, give a lot of opportunity to the youngsters, bring in the public-private partnership, lot of development in infrastructure, logistics, and probably the employment sector is also now really moving up with a greater pace. So nevertheless, India retaining its position of 7 to 7.5% in the GDP, and the forecasted that's going to be really good enough. India has made a rapid stride when it comes to the global economic development. Followed by the recent developments that we are speaking about. Of course, everybody loves to talk about this three-letter word called as GDP. And GDP is not just about the exports and imports that I'm going to rely upon, but GDP is also going to talk about the inherent capacity, the inherent quality that as a country carries with itself. Over a long period of time, we have been seeing that India is a very, very powerful nation which is able to create a phase of growth. It's able to create a situation, it's able to create a factor of growth, a model altogether where you are able to see that the income opportunities, the growth opportunities are widening, plus the purchasing power parity is also increasing, and at the same time, not to forget, the consumption patterns are also going up. One side, we talk about inflation, we talk about the market economy, the common prices rising, the goods of the common prices rising up, but the other side, we should not forget that the GDP growth is pushing up. Why? Because now India is trying to manufacture and export it across the globe. So the cost of production, though it is higher, but the opportunity that is also present before the country is very good. So that means to say that the private consumption, the public consumption in terms of growth and in terms of the supply and demand side factors, we have been doing extremely well. Why? Because India is now becoming the supplier to the globe. whether it's going to be an iPhone or it's going to be steel or it's going to be cars, or you talk about the chemical or the banking sector, any of the sector, India is very, very clearly positioned itself as to become the supplier, and it's creating a huge demand for its services. So this is actually making Indian economy a stronger economy, and it's trying to grow up at a very good pace altogether. Now, the sector drivers of the growth, definitely pharma, education, healthcare. Probably we also see that the information technology coupled with the financial sector are the short growth drivers altogether. They are just pushing the economy to the next level, and we are seeing today that with the amount of expansion, the microfinance and the various opportunities getting in, business and entrepreneurship is taking a new league altogether. Probably in the last 5 or 10 years, India has become the startup capital of the world, and that's also very good news for us. Why? Because youngsters are able to go forward and create better opportunities for the sector. And the next thing is that the aggregate demand that needs to be looked upon, the growth of demand, the investment rate has also doubled up in India. Private consumption has gone up. It's accelerating at a massive pace that we can ever think about. The role of private consumption is important, but then it declined below the investment for the first time. When we look into these factors, one side, one has to be very, very particular when we talk about these words. Why? Because sometimes I do feel that though the economy requires a little bit of push when it starts coming to the pre-pandemic level back again into picture, but the other side, what is happening is that overall the scenario does not look as bullish as that for India. India is in a sweet spot today. India is definitely considered to be the best and the safest emerging market that anybody can think about. So rightly said, this is the time for us where there is a lot of positive contribution that is coming in terms of manufacturing as well as in terms of services. Now, the government consumption is also on the lower contribution, no doubt about it. But of course, the statistics are a little bit older. If I start looking towards at the 2022 level, these have significantly gone up. Followed by the manufacturing. Yes, we have added up the GDP, the net value added, the GCF, the investment, the gross capital factors all have been going up to a very great extent. I would also like to make a special mention about the automobile sector, the EV sector altogether. Why? Because the electric vehicle, automobile sector, all these factors have been able to contribute to a huge amount of growth altogether. They have started working towards building a greater sector, a greater level of push in the economy. When we are talking about the GDP and its value added growth, the automobile sector, today India has become one of the most developing nations when it comes to the car and the automobile sector. Now that is really wonderful. Why? Because with a large consumption market available and people looking in for a variety of segments altogether, this automobile sector directly, indirectly has been contributing to millions of jobs across. And plus, we are also able to see that the other emerging sector, communication, with the 5G getting introduced in India, the Indian economy is also making a very good stride. Why? Because you have a very big market which is looking in for competitive and efficient products that are being looked about. So definitely you are getting a space to innovate and develop yourself. Followed by the trade, agriculture and construction, a never-ending sector. But definitely these sectors are making a remarkable comeback. If you go back and start looking into the real estate sector, what had happened during the pandemic levels and currently right now, we have moved back leagues ahead in terms of growth of construction, a lot of highways, a lot of bridge, a lot of other factors that have been going on. Connectivity in terms of roadways have also gone up, and better living conditions. That is making India even more a prominent feature in the Indian economy. The trade sector has developed, and we have seen about 34% growth in terms of the trade altogether. Moving on, the lower per capita income, of course, I'm just going back on this data in 2017 when it was about $1,983. That's about just $1,983 that we were, and we were ranked about 140 among 180. Of course, currently we have gone up, we have increased our per capita income, and we have been moving in inches altogether. But nevertheless, why India is lesser on the per capita income? There are several other factors. The reason being is that when we look into the agriculture sector, the income that is generated by that sector is predominantly lesser when compared to the other sector. So we feel that this sector requires a lot of push. It requires a lot of demand coming up altogether. So definitely this would be looked into as one of the most emerging factors. This needs a lot of push in terms of growth and development. Next thing that we can conclude here is that as per the low capita income, the Indian resident is lower than most of the countries in the world. Yeah, that is quite nominal that we see, because many people in India still have not risen above the average factor. They've not been able to create that sort of an influx altogether. But nevertheless, we would start going up in terms of the per capita income also. Followed by the occupational pattern. The occupational pattern in India has been primarily on the primary producing, that's on the agriculture sector. Still we have about 72% of the people coming from direct and indirect factors of agriculture. 52% of people are still taken agriculture as their primary occupation. 2011 and 12, you would see that the agriculture's national income contribution was 13.9%. There was a disparity. Of course, today you would see that the same 13.9% has grown up to 20% in terms of contribution of the agricultural sector. Followed by, we also see that agriculture sector had taken a backseat because of the income parity, but nevertheless it was substituted by the manufacturing and the services sector. Today we see that there is a close competition that's coming up between agriculture, manufacturing and the services, which are the three formats of the sector of the economy altogether. Why we are seeing that all the old economies are again reviving, they are bouncing back. There is a huge opportunity that has been created there, and we see that in the long run, there is an opportunity of growth that has been pronounced here. Now, the population pressure, we all know about it with 140 crore people across in this country, and we know that we are contributing to roughly about 20% of the world population. Now, you can't ask for more. If you just look into this picture, you will be able to see the amount of population pressure that has been falling onto this country. To satisfy this 140 crore people, provide them the essentials, the daily needs itself becomes a very big challenge for this particular economy to go forward and do it. But we have been looking into it on a more challenging aspect altogether. What we are seeing here is that we have started moving towards the alternative growth methodology. We have started switching ourselves more into the world of organic farming. We have started seeing how we can produce alternative energy channels so that we are able to stand by and serve the population as far as possible. Now, the chronic underemployment and the unemployment was a scenario before 2014 and 15, but nevertheless, we have changed. Today, if you start looking, we have been able to bring the unemployment rate well below 8%. And because of the entrepreneurship coming out in India, what we have been able to see is that there's a huge lot of opportunities coming up, both from the private as well as the public sector. Now, by improving the transportation sector, infrastructure, and that of manufacturing, we have been able to create a lot of jobs, and never to forget the gig economy workers that we are talking about today. Something like Zomato, Flipkart, Amazon, or when we talk about Swiggy or Dunzo, the gig economy workers have consistently started going up in India in every part, in every nook and corner, which has also helped in terms of the employment generation. Now, the steady state improvement in the rate of capital, yes, it has been improving. 2017, the population growth in India was about 1.13%, and that has also contributed directly or indirectly for the cost of living. We could see that as the population increases, the cost of living is also increasing. There's a shortage in terms of space. There has been a shortage in terms of essential commodities, and the prices of these commodities have been increasingly going up on a day-to-day basis. So there's something that needs to be done to arrest the inflation and also start bringing in a common pricing methodology so that the common man is not affected at all. But this is only a cyclic disorder that has been happening because of the pandemic. Nevertheless, we would be overcoming this particular cycle and we would be able to get a much more stabilized nation in the coming days. Now, if you just look into the graph, what has been very, very relevant for us is that inequality in the wealth distribution, though we can say today that we got about 20 people in the world billionaires list plus, but nevertheless, we also see that there has been an inequality in income distribution, especially in the rural part of India. That's probably why, because we did not concentrate on the rural segment for a very long time. We did not give them enough opportunities, lot of unemployment, chronic diseases, healthcare issues and problems. So most of the population migrated towards the cities. But this is not that essentially bad condition right now. Why? Because we also see that the rural India has started growing up in the last 5 years. So definitely by 2025, 2030, we would be able to see that the rural India is going to be the new face of India with better development and opportunities coming on the way. The poor human capital quality, yes, sometimes we felt that because of the illiteracy, we have a new problem called as poor quality or low quality in terms of the human capital. But today, when we talk about the Indian education system with 750 plus universities in India, both in public and private put together, and we see that there's huge amount of graduates coming out of this college every day. Now we are able to see that the quality of the human capital is also consistently improving. In the 80s and 90s, we felt that education sector needs to be liberated. Thanks to the new education policy of the 2020, the national education policy has been able to liberate and bring in more of skills oriented so that everybody can be a part of this education stream and produce quality workforce to the nation. Low levels of technology, this might have been true if I'm talking about 10 or 15 years back, but today India stands as the #1 in terms of growth. What happened previously is that the companies and the organization were not that familiar with technology, and most of the industry was not able to absorb the technology that was being given in the market. But then slowly India after 2005 started creating its own intellectual based technology, homegrown technologies altogether, which has made India a technological base. And today if you see India, fortunately we have grown ahead and created our own markets altogether. Now the long-term sustaining growth, we are seeing that the reforms that are essential is to retain a 9% growth year on year, structural change in the labor market. We need to overcome the competition, especially the industrial segment of sugar, fertilizer and other factors that needs to be taken care of. Education skills, which are very, very important for us. The urban land policy usage, supply side as well as the demand side has to be matched at any given point of time. So with all these factors coming in position, definitely India is bound to become a better nation, a more quality oriented nation. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the input shared through this session would be of great help and resource to you. In the upcoming session, we are going to talk about the demographic features of the Indian economy, which is very useful for us in terms of understanding the reforms in this particular sector. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.